You won't believe how an ordinary morning at a quiet cafe turned into a moment that changed the way I saw my own family, my past, and even myself. A stranger walked straight up to me, yet somehow he knew my son. What he told me opened a door I didn't even realize had been closed. Before we begin, tell me from which cities you are watching us today. And if you enjoy stories filled with real emotion and surprising turns, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It helps more than you know. The morning had started the same as always, with the soft clinking of cups behind the counter and that warm, comforting smell of fresh coffee drifting through the air like a familiar embrace. The cafe near my neighborhood had become my quiet corner of the world, a little refuge where I could breathe before the day sped away from me. At my age, somewhere between 40 and 60, though I never felt I fit neatly into any number, I valued those simple pauses more than ever. Life gets loud in other ways. I chose my usual table, the one by the window where the autumn sunlight stretched across the wooden surface like honey. I had barely taken my first sip when the bell above the door chimed. It was a gentle sound, one I normally ignored, but this time it tugged my attention as if someone had whispered my name. A man stepped inside. Something about him made me look twice. Not because he was dramatic or loud. He wasn't. He moved with quiet purpose, scanning the room, uncertainty flickering across his face. He looked to be in his early 30s, maybe a little older, with that expression people wear when they're searching for someone, but not sure how the reunion will go. When his eyes landed on me, he stopped. His shoulders eased, as though he had finally found the answer to a question he'd been asking for a long time. I felt a light flutter in my chest, not out of fear, but out of that deep curiosity that wakes up when something unexpected touches the edges of your routine. He walked closer, hesitating before he approached my table. "Excuse me," he said softly. "Are you Daniel's mom?" Hearing my son's name from the mouth of a stranger sent a warm rush of confusion through me. Daniel had always been social, but he rarely talked about new acquaintances, and certainly not ones who would search for me in a cafe. "Yes, I am," I answered, sitting a little straighter. "How do you know Daniel?" The man let out a slow breath, as if he'd been rehearsing this moment. He pulled out the chair across from me, but waited for my nod before sitting. That small gesture of respect struck me immediately. "My name is Aaron," he said. "Your son helped me a while ago. More than he probably realizes, and I've been hoping to talk to you, because there's something important he never told you." My heart tightened in that way it does when a mother senses her child is involved in something deeper than they admit. The cafe suddenly felt quieter, the morning light softer, as though the room itself were listening. "What is this about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Aaron glanced at his hands before looking back at me. There was sincerity in his eyes, a kind of earnestness I didn't see often anymore. He told me he had met my son during a difficult moment in his life, one he didn't describe in detail, but enough for me to understand the weight of it. According to him, Daniel had been there for him in a way that went beyond casual kindness. But then Aaron said something that made me put my cup down completely. He said he learned it from you, he told me, that you were the reason he knew how to show understanding when someone needed it most. And I thought, you should know the impact you've had. On him, on others, even people like me. I didn't know what to say at first. The words caught in my throat, not out of discomfort, but out of the sudden swell of emotion. A stranger sitting across from me, telling me something about my own son, something beautiful, something I didn't know I needed to hear. As we talked, I found myself studying him more closely. The lines of tiredness near his eyes, the way he folded his hands as though trying to hold still a piece of himself that had once been shaken. There was no tension between us, just a strange, gentle recognition. Two people connected by someone we both cared about, even if for different reasons. The cafe filled slowly with late-morning visitors, but our small table seemed untouched by the shift in energy. It remained its own quiet island, suspended between reflection and the surprising warmth of newfound understanding. Yet beneath the calm surface, I sensed something more in Aaron, something he hadn't said yet, a story behind his story, and I could feel it pressing forward, waiting for the right moment to unfold. I didn't know then that what he had come to tell me would challenge old assumptions, stir memories I thought were settled, and open a path I never expected to walk. But that moment was coming. And when it finally arrived, it would change more than just my quiet morning at the cafe. The rest of that morning felt as though time had slowed just enough for me to feel every detail around us. The thin trail of steam rising from my cup, the faint hum of conversation at nearby tables, the soft tap of rain beginning against the window, even though the forecast had promised a clear day. Life has a way of shifting when you least expect it, and I sensed we had stepped into one of those rare moments where something important waits patiently beneath ordinary conversation. Aaron took a slow breath, almost bracing himself, as he looked at me with that same careful sincerity. It was clear he had more to say, something he'd been carrying for a while, and now that he had found me, he didn't want to waste the opportunity. "I didn't come here today just to thank you," he said, his voice steady but gentler than before. "There's something Daniel shared with me, something he thought you should hear one day, but he never found the right time to tell you." That made my pulse stir. My son wasn't one to hide things, not intentionally, but like many grown children, he often kept certain parts of his inner world tucked away. Hearing that he'd confided in someone else, someone I had never met, struck me with an unexpected mixture of pride and unease. "What did he tell you?" I asked carefully. Aaron looked toward the window, watching the drizzle blur the edges of the street outside, as though collecting his thoughts from the shifting colors. When he spoke again, his words were steady, but his expression held a kind of weight that made me lean in. "He told me that he learned how to listen, really listen, from you," he said. "But he also told me he never quite knew how to tell you that he admired you more than anyone else. He worried that saying it out loud would make you uncomfortable, or make you think he was trying to make up for something." I felt a gentle ache bloom deep inside my chest. A mother always hopes she has reached her child in the ways that matter, beyond the school lunches and curfews and life lessons. Hearing that he had said these things to a stranger made the words feel all the more genuine, as though they had been spoken without any expectation. "I wish he had told me himself," I whispered. Aaron nodded softly. He wanted to, but sometimes saying things face to face feels too big. I knew that feeling. Even at my age, certain emotions still felt like they occupied too much space to handle all at once. But hearing that my son had shared this with someone else, it filled me with a complicated warmth, a kind of tender gratitude mixed with a slight sting of misunderstanding. Aaron shifted in his seat, his voice dropping to a quieter tone. "There's something else," he said, "something more personal. And I want you to know I'm not telling you this to worry you. I'm telling you because it's part of why I came." The cafe around us seemed to dim into the background. Even the clinking dishes felt distant. I braced myself for news of a struggle or a mistake or something my son had kept to himself. But the next words that came were not what I expected. "Daniel told me that you were the first person who ever showed him what strength really looks like," Aaron said. "Not the kind that comes from pushing through everything, but the kind that grows from being honest with yourself, even when it hurts." My hands tightened around my warm mug. A wave of memory washed over me, years of carrying more than I ever admitted, of raising him through days when I wasn't sure I'd done enough, of teaching him how to understand others, even when I barely understood myself. To hear that he saw strength in me, it felt like someone opening a window in a room I hadn't realized had grown dim. I blinked, grounding myself in the present. "Why did he tell you all this?" I asked quietly. "Why you?" Aaron hesitated, and when he looked at me again, his expression held something new, something deeper, almost protective. "Because," he said slowly, I was going through something that reminded him of what you had been through years earlier. And he told me your story, not the details, just the way you got through it, so I wouldn't feel alone. I felt the air catch in my throat. My son had shared my resilience with someone who needed it. He had offered my strength like a gift. Aaron watched me carefully, making sure I wasn't overwhelmed, and I appreciated that small gesture more than he could have known. And he asked me, Aaron continued, that if I ever saw you again by chance, or if life put me in your path somehow, I should tell you that he thinks you're braver than you realize. The words settled over me like a soft blanket. I hadn't expected to feel so moved by a man I hadn't known an hour earlier, but something about the sincerity with which he spoke. It was impossible not to feel connected to it, to him. I looked at Aaron, really looked at him, and saw not just a stranger, but someone who had been touched by my son in a way that reflected back on me. Thank you, I said, my voice rougher than I intended. I didn't know I needed to hear any of this. Aaron nodded, and for a moment we simply sat there, letting the silence settle comfortably between us. The kind of silence that doesn't demand anything, just allows two people to exist in the same moment of understanding. But beneath that calm, a new curiosity began to rise inside me. Because Aaron's presence wasn't random, and his story wasn't finished. There was something more he had come to say. And I could feel it drawing closer, like the quiet shift of a tide. The rain outside thickened into a soft curtain, turning the world beyond the window into blurred shapes of cars, umbrellas, and distant movement. Inside the café, the warm lights glowed against the cool gray of the morning, wrapping the small space in a gentle calm. Yet despite the cozy atmosphere, something in the air between Aaron and me felt charged, subtle, quiet, but unmistakably present. Aaron folded his hands, studying them as though arranging his thoughts with care. I waited, sensing he was balancing what he wanted to say against what he worried might be too much. It struck me again how considerate he was, how measured. People his age often rushed through their thoughts, but he carried his words like something fragile. When Daniel helped me, he began slowly, I didn't tell him everything. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I wasn't ready yet. He lifted his eyes to mine, and something vulnerable glimmered there. Nothing dramatic or unsettling, just honest. I wasn't only going through a difficult time, he said. I was searching for something I didn't have the courage to face. I thought I'd handled everything on my own for years, but it caught up with me. I nodded gently, encouraging him without pushing. Daniel told me about the way you used to sit with people. He continued, how you could sense when someone needed a moment of kindness, even before they said anything. He said you understood quiet struggles better than anyone he knew. I felt my breath still. Those were parts of myself I rarely talked about, even within the family. I had spent years supporting others, friends, neighbors, even strangers, offering a listening ear, a calm presence. It wasn't something I had ever seen as special, just necessary. He told me, Aaron added, his voice softening, that he wished he had inherited that part of you, that ability to make someone feel at ease. The words sank into me with a warmth that spread slowly, the way sunlight does after days of overcast skies. He does have it, I said without thinking, maybe more than he realizes. Aaron gave a small smile at that, one touched with familiarity, as though he had always believed it but appreciated hearing it from me. Then his expression shifted, growing more serious. There's something I came to tell you that's harder, he said, something I hesitated to bring up, but I think you deserve to know. My pulse quickened, though nothing about him felt dangerous or intrusive. It was more like standing at the edge of a memory you aren't sure you're ready to revisit. You see, Aaron continued, when I met your son, I wasn't in a good place. I felt disconnected from everything. My work, my family, even myself. And Daniel didn't try to fix me. He just listened. He told me a story about you, about a moment from your past when you thought you had lost your way but found strength again. My throat tightened. That moment, I knew which one he meant, even without details. My son must have spoken of it carefully, respectfully. It was a part of my life I rarely illuminated. And what he said stayed with me, Aaron said, more than anything else. What did he say? I asked quietly. That you talk in resilience by living it, he said. And that if I ever needed to understand how someone pulls themselves back together without losing their kindness, I should meet you. The air between us changed. It felt fuller, deeper, not heavy, just meaningful in a way I hadn't anticipated when I walked into the cafe that morning. I exhaled slowly. I didn't know he saw me that way. Aaron nodded. He sees more than he says. He hesitated again, then leaned forward slightly, not close, just enough to show sincere intent. And the truth is, I didn't stumble upon you by chance. My breath caught. I asked around. Aaron admitted gently. I knew what neighborhood Daniel grew up in. I knew which cafes he mentioned when he talked about you. I didn't want to intrude, so I waited until I felt ready. Until I felt I could speak clearly, without placing anything heavy on your shoulders. I held his gaze, absorbing the quiet courage of that confession. It didn't feel unsettling. Strangely, it felt thoughtful, purposeful, respectful. You came to find me, I said softly. Yes, he answered, because what your son told me. It helped me rebuild parts of my life, and I needed you to know the role you played in that, even without ever meeting me. Something warm unfurled inside me, unexpected but comforting. A gentle pride mixed with humble disbelief. It had been a long time since someone had looked at me with such open gratitude. But then Aaron's expression shifted again, something unresolved flickering behind his eyes. There's one more thing, he said. Something I didn't plan to tell you today, but standing here with you, I feel like I have to. The rain softened outside, as if even the weather sensed the moment tightening. I felt the quiet anticipation settle deep in my chest. Aaron, I said, steadying my voice, you can tell me. He drew a slow breath, and in the silence that followed, I felt the story moving toward a turning point, one that would cast the next chapter of our conversation into surprising, uncharted territory. And for the first time in years, I found myself ready for whatever came next. The soft patter of rain against the cafe windows had become a steady rhythm, almost like the heartbeat of the morning. It was calming, but inside, a quiet tension lingered between Aaron and me. I could feel it. He was holding back something important, something heavier than the gratitude and stories we had shared so far. And I sensed that once he spoke it, nothing about that morning would remain ordinary. Aaron looked out the window for a long moment, tracing the blurred shapes of umbrellas and passing cars. Then he turned his gaze back to me, calm but resolved. There's a part of Daniel's story I didn't fully understand at first, he said slowly. And I think, in some ways, I was afraid to understand it. But it became clearer after talking with him, and he wanted me to tell you. I nodded, signaling that he could continue, though my pulse had quickened slightly. There was a strange weight in the room, not uncomfortable, but anticipatory. It's about something that happened a few years ago, he continued, something that changed him in ways I couldn't see until he told me. And he shared it with me because he trusted me, and because he trusted you, even though he never said it outright. I leaned forward instinctively. The cafe felt smaller now, more intimate, as if the walls themselves were listening. I could feel the warmth of my coffee, the smell of toasted bread, the soft hum of conversation fading into background noise. Everything around us seemed to blur except for the man sitting across the table and the weight of the story he carried. Aaron took a deep breath. Daniel told me about a moment when he felt lost. He didn't know how to process it, and he felt like no one could understand. But he remembered something you did, something you taught him without saying a word, and it guided him, He told me that if it weren't for that memory, he might not have found the strength to keep moving forward. Tears prickled at the corners of my eyes, not from sadness, but from an overwhelming sense of connection. My son had carried a piece of me with him, quietly, through struggles I had never fully known. And now, through Aaron, that piece of me was returning in a way I hadn't expected. I swallowed hard, my voice catching slightly. "Hi, I don't know what to say." Aaron offered a gentle smile, one of understanding and reassurance. "You don't need to say anything. Just know that your influence, your patience, your kindness, your quiet strength, has reached farther than you could imagine. Daniel's story, the way he shared it with me, it's a reflection of you." We sat in silence for a few moments, letting the weight of that realization settle between us. The cafe seemed brighter now, the light shifting across the wooden tables in warm, golden patterns. Outside, the rain had lightened to a drizzle, and the world seemed to breathe again after the morning storm. Finally, I spoke. "It's strange," I said softly, "to hear my own life reflected through someone else's eyes. But it's comforting too. I never imagined that something as simple as listening, as being present, could have such an impact." Aaron nodded. "Sometimes the smallest gestures leave the deepest marks, and Daniel wanted you to know that, even if he didn't say it directly." A quiet gratitude filled the space between us, the kind that doesn't need words. I realized that this chance encounter, a stranger connected to my son, had given me a rare gift: perspective. I saw not only my son differently, but also myself. The woman who had quietly shaped lives, who had taught compassion and resilience without realizing it, was someone worth knowing and remembering. Aaron stood then, a subtle signal that our conversation was drawing to a close. But he paused before leaving, offering a final, meaningful glance. "Thank you for being who you are," he said simply. "Your son sees it, and now I do too." I watched him walk to the door, the bell chiming softly as he stepped out into the brightening morning. The cafe felt impossibly quiet after he left, but in that silence I felt a calm I hadn't expected, a sense of closure and connection all at once. Sitting there, my fingers wrapped around the warm cup, I reflected on the unexpected morning, the stranger who had known my son, and the truths he had shared. Life had a way of surprising us, sometimes through family, sometimes through chance encounters, and often the most meaningful revelations came from where we least expected them. And as I gazed out the window at the streets glistening from the rain, I realized that gratitude, connection, and understanding can appear in the most ordinary places, like a quiet cafe on a rainy morning, and leave a mark that lasts far longer than any one story. The morning had begun like any other, but it ended with something far greater: a deepened sense of perspective, a new appreciation for my son, and the quiet knowledge that kindness and strength ripple through lives in ways we often never see, but that never go unnoticed.